So the same thing, our students will not be perfect. With this in mind, I'd like to tell you what is going on in language teaching today. I'd like to give you a very brief review of what's happening and what we think are the better methods, except that I've lost my handout. Oh no. Can I borrow a handout? That's okay. Oh, thank you. Oh, here we are. Oh, it's a fresh, clean one. Okay, good. Oh, is this today's talk? This one is Getting Rich Through Real Estate. Okay, well, that was last week. You got to make a living, you know. Okay. How you can make money on the gold market. I figured out how to make money on the gold market. Give seminars on making money on the gold market. That's how okay. So the beginning stage, what we have, there's some methods that really do work well. They do what they're supposed to do. They give people lots and lots of comprehensible input. They keep the affective filter low. And in terms of the field, there have been several methods that do this. I'll give you just their historical sequence. TPR was the first one, developed by a man named James Asher in the 1970s. I remember reading his papers when they came out. Oh my gosh, so impressive, wonderful work. The teacher gives commands, the student obeys the commands. Teacher says, asseyez-vous, everybody sits down. Teacher says, levez-vous, everybody stands up. Gradually the commands get more and more complicated, and eventually the students can order the teacher around. After that, and the research results were great, as I'll show you. Tracy Terrell, my old friend, developed a system called Natural Approach, which included TPR and other things you do in class. And today, the one that's doing the best job is called TPRS, invented by a man named Blaine Ray, Teaching Proficiency Through Reading and Storytelling. What these methods have in common, they fill the classroom with comprehensible input, oral comprehensible input. They're organized. We still have a syllabus. We still have lesson plans, but the syllabus is not based on grammar. The syllabus is based on activities that students at that age will find interesting and comprehensible. So it's different for different people with different backgrounds. Our theory says, another corollary of the comprehension hypothesis, the theory says if you give people lots and lots of comprehensible input, all the grammar they need is automatically there. Isn't that wonderful? I'm going to repeat that. That's a big one. If you give people lots and lots of comprehensible input, all the grammar they need is automatically there. The core of all these methods, in my opinion, stories. Interesting stories. This is why TPRS is such a big advance, because it's based on stories. We have learned from first language acquisition the power of stories and storytelling. In the United States, the last 30 years, there's been a big revolution where more and more parents are now reading to their children. The person who deserves the most credit for this is a man named Jim Trelease, and his book, The Read Aloud Handbook. Oh my God, this is such a good book. Some of you have heard this. Let me tell you about my mother. My mother and I, may she rest in peace, had a perfect relationship. I owe everything. I am my mother's son, 100%, no question. I have no complaints about my mother at all, only admiration. One day she was in my office and she saw a copy of the Read Aloud Handbook. She picked it up and started reading it. She read the whole thing. And she turned to me and she said, Stephen, why can't you write like this? I said, I wish I could. So Trelease, who is just an amazing person, has transformed North America because of the Read Aloud Handbook. And the research on read alouds and stories is fantastic. Children who are read to in first language, who are read to regularly, in school or at home, do better on any kind of a test you give them. Always. Literacy, knowledge, everything. Now the reasons Read Aloud works, is, of course, that it's compelling stories. Children like to hear stories. 97%, something like that, like to hear stories. The 3% that don't, it's because their parents don't like to read stories to them. But everybody does. In fact, when we think that read-alouds are the beginning of a powerful path of literacy development. The sequence goes like this. Read aloud and stories leads to free voluntary reading. It provides the foundation. When a child hears stories, you know you're going to have success in school. It's nearly a guarantee. There's a famous quote from Albert Einstein. A woman came to Albert Einstein and said, Professor Einstein, I want my child to be brilliant like you, and a brilliant scientist. What should I do? And Einstein said, tell him fairy tales. Well, I really want to make sure. Then what should I do? Tell him more fairy tales. So fiction and stories, we think, are the first step. So this is what happens at the beginning level, and the research on this is very, very strong. If we look at these comprehensible input-based methods, and you compare them to traditional methods in scientific studies in professional journals, these methods have always won. The research goes back 40 years now. We have no exceptions. We have won in every comparison. You give them pre-test, post-test. If the test is communicative, if it's a speaking test or a reading comprehension, the students in the comprehensible input class are always better, and they're much better. If you give them a grammar test, there's no difference, or the comprehensible input students are slightly better. So we have basically solved the problem at the beginning level. By the way, if you want to know more about these things, all you have to do is Google TPRS, and you'll find lots and lots of good information, lots of materials, lots of ideas. But we know today that the beginning level is not enough. What these methods give you is what Professor Cummins from Canada calls conversational language. Today, we want more. Today in Hong Kong, for example, when we want people to know Mandarin, we want people to know English, it's not conversational. We want it for business. We want it for international communication. We want it for science. So we don't want just conversation language, we want academic language, which is fine. I think these methods are wonderful. I think we should use them, but they're not enough. There are two ways of going beyond conversational language, and I think we should do both of them. The first way is what we call sheltered subject matter teaching. Sheltered subject matter teaching means teaching language through content for intermediates. Let me introduce this to you by engaging you in an exercise in guided fantasy. Let's say that your school district has finally recognized you as the outstanding educator you are. And you're the winner of a major prize, the first Stephen Krashen Award for Excellence in Education. And your prize is 1 year study leave anywhere on earth you want to go, all expenses paid. Good idea? Fantastic, okay. So you have this thing, you said, I've always wanted to get really good in French. And I've always wanted to go to Paris. So I'm going to take the money and go to Paris. Let's pretend there's a program at the University of Paris, the Sorbonne, on French philosophy of education, and you want to do it. The problem is you don't really know very much French. You had 2 years in university, and you wanted more, but you couldn't fit it in, so your French is pretty weak. So you go to Paris early, and you're going to get your French better over the summer. Let's pretend we have two programs. Program number 1, you can go to for more grammar exercises. In French, they do dictations all the time. The teacher dictates a story, then you get it corrected and all that. Program number 2, you go right to the university. You sign up for a class called History of the French Educational System for international students only. That's you. You come to class, you sit down, you realize the student on your left is from Denmark. The student on your right is from Ethiopia. The student in front of you is from Korea. The student behind you is from Scotland. What you have in common is lousy French. And the teacher knows it. He's going to speak more slowly. He's going to use the board more. The readings are in French, but the print is a little larger than usual, and the language is kind of calmed down a little bit. More pictures, okay? The examinations are in French, but if you get the accent wrong, you won't be graded off. Also, you brought your grammar book with you, and if you want to do verbs in your room at night, you can do it if you want to. I predict after a summer like that, you'll be much better prepared to study at the university than had you gone to the grammar class. I've just described a sheltered subject matter class.